this year it was Badami, and which is a very unique site from various perspectives. So if one looks at that site, you have the lake, you have ancient temples, you have a medieval settlement there. The theme was to reimagine an archaeological museum. So the program begins to connect past, present, future in so many perspectives. And what was heartening was that each project that came in for this competition had a very different idea of how to respond, and each had so many other possibilities that it was exploring. Last year, the Charles Correa memorial, or the tribute to Charles Correa, again the site was selected very sensitively. We've seen the book that has recently got published. It kind of reveals that schools of architecture in India, students are introspecting, inspired, working, and it gives a completely different perspective of students in schools of architecture in India. You know, when you see this kind of a competition published in a book, it's open. So last year was more linked to interpretations of an architect who was respected in the country, and different perspectives or interpretations of Charles Correa's work, in a sense a tribute to him also. This year it was more in terms of heritage, more in terms of present, more in terms of what inspires a community, and what is the role of an architect, that beyond doing a building or a project or a program, that an architect can contribute something to society or to a community, where that building doesn't stand as a fort in itself, but becomes a kind of threshold for a better life for everyone around, you know. And I think that's the nature of this kind of a project, which was very, so it was very thought-provoking even for the jury. And between the jury there was another discussion. The students presenting, it was more a dialogue to look at different perspectives, to understand the role of an architect in making sense of the world around us. Travel really brings about a certain introspection, but an experiential reality of what are the possibilities of architecture, you know? And in very simple terms. So it doesn't always have to be very complex. Sometimes very direct, simple architecture, even in a village, can carry so many possibilities, you know, on sustainability, on climate, on the way they live, relationship to nature. So I think Badami is that way an amazing site. And when we were discussing with the students, we realized that each student who had delved into the project felt that they had learned tremendously when they completed it and presented it, you know. So it becomes a learning process, because the site, its context, its other conditions and the program kind of lend itself to that kind of a research, that kind of a search, that kind of a exploration and curiosity. Each of the 10 had very introspective idea or a seed in their mind. So as a jury we thought, let's really open it up to the idea itself, and let's open it up to what kind of process of thinking happened. There were students from Indonesia, there were students from, you know, other countries. So it was good to kind of have a conversation on how did the students perceive something like this. And they had such refreshingly different perspectives, and I think that's the real source of inspiration for a project like this. The students went to the site, they kind of really explored the site, tried to understand it, tried to look at what the site context was at different times of the day, different seasons. And I think that actually lends a kind of a deeper process because now there's a real experience of the site and there's a reality of the site. It's not just a 2-line drawing or a 3-line drawing. And by going to the site, I think the intuitions of design open up in completely new ways which language cannot easily describe. That was the promise of today's competition, that they were discussing many deeper intuitions, deeper aspirations, deeper ideas that they got on being in the site. And at times it may take time to even articulate it clearly. 1 year later, this visit may come back to the students in a new way. And that's the I would say energy of human memory, which comes from this kind of a travel. So I think every year to select the top 3 is always challenging for several reasons. I think if each has a very, very different idea or a perspective, but because there was a dialogue with each student, because there was a dialogue between the jurors also, and there was a kind of understanding that one will look at context, one will look at an idea, one will look at how the project relates to the context, looks at what is the nature of the program, relationship to climate and the community. So there are various kind of aspects or issues that kind of surface in a project like this. So from that point, it is still tentatively possible to kind of go through the process, because there are certain guidelines to understand whether a project is relating to a site, whether a project is conscious of climate, whether a project has designed the program in a way that it can accept those functions, what is its role over time, whether it relates to the lake, whether it relates to the community. So these are not so intangible, there's a certain tangibility to it, but still I would say it remains open-ended, because between jury also we are having a discussion, and there are different perspectives, but then one comes to a consensus through that kind of a dialogue. So I think that's the both the challenge, but that's also the promise of juries like that, or promise of architecture itself, because there's no one truth, and I think it's all fair to have an open dialogue, discuss, and even those presenting beginning to realize what that project was doing and what more they could have done, how they could have looked at it differently. I think that's more important than the competition, or I think the very process of discussing, dialogue, learning new issues, I think almost all the participants and students said that's the reason they are here, that's the reason they kind of participate in the Badami one. Not, I think winning, losing, or not winning, those are all incidental. But I would say the spirit of an open dialogue between the jury members invited and between students and us, which is an open dialogue. There's very high respect even when there's disagreement on ideas, and I think that's the touchstone for a great conversation or discourse on architecture, because ideas would be different, but if they are not personalized, then everyone grows in the difference. There is more excitement in the difference, and one realizes that the difference comes from different contexts, different perspectives, and if that kind of a difference begins to coexist, we definitely have a more enriched world. So I think that's what I would see as what one carries away as memories from today.